Hello and welcome to my first YouTube video ever. In this video, I will try to teach you async await functions with a real-world example. So, what are we going to do in this video? We'll build currency converter that is going to fetch data from two different APIs. The first API will give us exchange rate, and the second one will give us countries that we can use the money we exchange to in. Okay, so we are going to do all asynchronously. So all fetching of the data is asynchronous. And we are going to do this first with promises and then with async await. So I can show you the differences and the benefits of async await functions. Async functions are a new way to write asynchronous code. They are built on top of promises, therefore they are also not blocking. The big difference is that asynchronous code looks and behaves a little more like synchronous code, and that's where all of its power lies. We will see all of that in action really soon. Okay, so we can basically start writing code. First, let's just see how we're going to do this. Okay, so we'll do the program in three functions. First function is going to fetch data from the first API, and we'll get exchange rate here. The second function is going to fetch data from the second API, also asynchronously, and we are going to get the list array of countries there. And the third function will combine the first two functions and output it nicely to the user. Okay, so we can start writing code finally now. Okay, first we'll do npm init just to do a basic package.json. Okay, we can just skip through all of this. Okay, and we can just install Axios, because we are going to need Axios for fetching the data from the two APIs. And wait a second. Okay, after that is done, we can just create a currency converter.js. Okay, and open that. I'll just copy this to my file. Okay, now that we are in file, all the logic is going to be done here. So before we start, we can check what are we going to get from these two different APIs. So from the first API, we are going to receive an array of different exchange rates we can use to exchange our currencies. As we can see, they're all here. And we can see that we'll have a base currency that everything is going to be exchanged from. So we'll need to take that into consideration. And the second API is going to provide us with countries and all the different informations that we can use our currency in. But we are going to use just the name of different countries, so we'll need to map over that and just get the name. Okay, so the second API is free to use, but the first one requires you to have a key. So I'll link down below a place where you can sign in for free, and you just need to input your mail and you'll get your own access key. But for this video, I'll just leave it as it is, and you can use my access key, so you don't get bothered by that and just start coding. Okay, so now that we know what our APIs do, we can just get back to code and start writing things out. Okay, first we need to require Axios up there. So const Axios will be equal to require Axios. Now we can use Axios library in our file, and we can dive right in with writing our first function. So with the first function, as we mentioned earlier, we are going to just fetch data from the API and output it, and that is going to be exchange rate. So we can write const get exchange rate, and that is going to be equal to an arrow function, which is going to take in two parameters, from currency and to currency. And the main thing we'll do here in this function is fetch the data from the API. So we can write axios.get, and that will be equal to the data from this URL. As I said, this is my access key here, and I'll leave the URLs of these APIs down below, but you can create your own account and sign in, so you'll get your own access key if you want to. Okay, now that we get our data, we know that this returns a promise. That is going to be a response. And with promises, we need to do that then, and then this arrow function, and here we got our promise. So we can write a rate, which will be equal to response that data that rates, and we can console.log rate, sorry, to see what do we get back. We can call our function here, get exchange rate, with, let's say, American dollar and euro, and we should get something like, okay, we get all the currencies here, exchange rates for all the currencies from the base currency, which is euro. Okay, finally can move further, and now since everything is being converted from euro, we'll need to get euro. So euro will be equal to 1 divided by rate. So this is the data, this is array of all rates, rate, and we are going to need from currency, and that is going to be equal to euro. After we have euro, we can just simply get exchange rate, which is going to be equal to euro times rate to currency. Simple enough. And now finally we can console.log exchange rate, and we get that 1 American dollar is equal to 0.87 euros. Now, this is the promises way of doing it. We can see that we already started nesting some things out, and we could see that if we wanted to resolve some errors, we also need that catch and stuff like that. But with asynchronous functions, it is much easier to do all of this. So we are going to fetch data, and we are going to it is going to look a bit more synchronous and easy to understand. So let's dive right into asynchronous functions. To make a function asynchronous, we are going to we just need to do one thing, and that one thing is typing the keyword async before the function expression. So here we have arrow function, and we just need to type async here. If we had normal functions, it is the same thing. You just need to type async before the function. Now this whole function becomes asynchronous, and we can basically get rid of this promise, because the magical thing we can do with async functions is that we can assign all the data we asynchronously fetch here to a variable. So we can type const response will be equal to axios.get and then this URL. So we just get all the data, this response here that we needed to nest to get, we get all into this variable. And there is one more magical keyword, just one. So we have async, and the second one is, you guessed it, await. So inside asynchronous functions, you can write a special keyword that is await, which awaits the data to be fetched. So it asynchronously waits, doesn't assign anything to response until this axios.get returns something, and then it is being assigned to this response. And as we can see now, since we have our response here, we don't need to do all of this nesting. We can just copy these things out and paste them here, and we can delete all of this, properly nest this, and we can see that now we got this. We can call our get exchange rate again, and we get exactly the same data, with no nesting. This is the possibility of async await functions. And just as we did here, imagine if we had something more complex. If we had to call that then inside that then inside that then. That is exactly what callback hell looks like. And here we are just one level deep inside the function, and that is really nice. So now that we know what are we getting from the first function, which is just exchange rate, we can simply return it. And we are going to use that in our third function. But now we can move on to our second function. Inside our second function, we are going to fetch the data from the second API, the countries API. Here, we will write a function, getCountries, that is going to be an arrow function and is going to take in one parameter, currency. So we just have the second parameter from this function because we need the data to know to get the countries that we'll be using our currency in. So we needed currency. Finally, we don't need to create this in a promises way. Since we saw how to do async await here, we can just do it with async await. Okay, so first thing we need to do to exchange this function to asynchronous function, we need to write the keyword async before the function expression. And we know that we can assign the data that we get asynchronously directly to a variable. So we just need to type await, so it awaits the data from the API, and we'll get axios.get. And now I will place two backticks to create a string literal here, because we are going to have to change some part of our URL based on what user inputs. So I'm going to copy this URL here, and now that we have our URL, we have currency, and we need to specify which currency, and that is coming from here. User types it in, so we can just use that currency. And now we can console.log response.data. Okay, you can call that function down there with one currency code specified. So we can type USD, American dollar, and we can run it. Okay, now we get all of this data here, but all we really need is a name of the country. We can see here that we have name, okay, and here is another name, and stuff like that. So we are going to loop through that. Okay, we can get response.data, and we are just going to map through it, and we are going to do it this way, country. So we're going to mapping through an array of different data, and every object in that array is a country, and we'll we can console.log first to see it. We'll just get country.name. Okay, we can run that again, and we should see that's it. Names of all the countries we can use American dollar in. Okay, now we are not going to console.log, rather we are going to return it. Okay, our second function is done. Now we can move to our third function. As we said, in our third function, we are going to combine all the data we get here. Here we get exchange rate, and here we get the names of all the countries we can use currency we exchange to. So let's write our third function. It is going to be called conveniently convert currency. It is also going to be an arrow function, and it is going to take in two parameters, from currency to currency and amount of money we want to convert. Finally, we can asynchronously catch all the data. As you can see, this to function we aren't using anywhere. The data is just here. But now we are going to make use of these two functions in our third convert currency function. And we are going to get data, fetch data asynchronously. So we can write const exchange rate. And we know where is that coming from. It's coming from this function, which is getting here it asynchronously. So this function is also asynchronous. And we will await that exchange rate from get exchange rate. And we are simply going to pass from currency and to currency. Now we can use that exchange rate here, simply with this async await syntax. Then we can get countries in the same fashion. Bam, that's it. Now we have exchange rate and countries in our third function. Finally, we can calculate the converted amount. Converted amount is going to be equal to amount times exchange rate. Simple enough. We are going to put that into parentheses so we can round it to 2 decimal points to be more simple for user to read. And finally, we can return it in a way that is easier for users to read. So we're going to return a string literal with 2 backticks, and it is going to be like this. So we write $ bracers amount from currency is worth converted amount to currency. We can see that we get here. So let's see, 5 American dollars is worth something euros. Simple as that. Afterwards, we'll just specify in which countries the user can use the money in. So we'll type you can spend these in the following countries, and we'll just do simply countries. Okay, that should be it. Now, since we don't use console logs here, we will have to call the function differently. Okay, I'll just delete these APIs and we have our 3 functions. Now we can call convert currency to get meaningful data. Since we are returning with async wait functions here, wait, this convert, okay, it's converted amount, not converted currency, sorry. We can call this function convert currency, pass in the parameters. So let's say we want to convert I don't know, from American dollars to euros, and we want to convert $30. Now we need to call that on this function. Then that is going to have, let's indent this properly, that is going to return us this message. Okay, and we can just console.log message. Okay, if we run this now, we will see that we get this. 30 American dollars is worth 97.29 euros. You can spend this in the following countries. Okay, let's have something that is more easier to read. So we'll do, I don't know, Croatian kuna, and we'll console.log. Okay, $30 is worth 195 Croatian kunas. You can spend this in Croatia. Now, we have that done, but we do not have that catch. What if something goes wrong? How will we output that to the user? Okay, for our first function, since the first API doesn't provide us with error handling by itself, we are going to need to create error handling by ourselves. Okay, so we can do that with a simple if statement. So we need to check whether uh, exchange rate is not a number. So we'll write is not a number and pass in exchange rate. So if we calculate from currency into currency, and if everything works well, exchange rate must be a number. It cannot be not a number or undefined or null or something else. It has to be a number. So if exchange rate is not a number, we are certain that something went wrong, and then we can throw new error, and we'll do it with string literal with backticks, so we can provide more useful information for the user, and we'll say unable to get currency, and we'll write from currency and to currency. And now, if everything works as expected, we should be able to chain that catch here with an error and console.log error message. Now we should get useful information for the cases in which we misspell or mistype currency from and currency to. So let's see what our console provides us with. And we get unable to get currency, USDD, and HRK. So let's write normal currencies like American and Canadian dollar, and let's run the function again. And we get the user-friendly input. Okay, so we can catch errors like this. Or for the second function, since our API provides us with error checking by itself, and since we are using async functions, we can just use try and catch block. So we'll write try and catch with an error. And now we have try catch block. In try, we can simply put all of our logic like this. And in catch, we'll just throw new error. So it will come to the catch if and only if there is an error and this doesn't run properly. And then we will write unable to get countries that use, and we'll write to currency. So if something doesn't work out here, if we write to currency wrong, or the country doesn't exist, the currency doesn't exist, we should get an error saying that the function is unable to get the countries that use to currency. And we can try that. Instead of Canadian dollar, let's try 123. And now, if 123 doesn't exist as a currency, and I hope it does not, we should get a meaningful error down there. Let's see. Okay, first we get unable to get currency, USD, and 123. And we see that we will always get this error if it doesn't work out. So maybe, just maybe, we can try exchanging these two functions so that we get more meaningful error down there if the country doesn't exist. And then we can get our first error. So let's try to clear the console and try calling it again. And now we get unable to get countries that use 123. And if we type something meaningful here, and our first currency doesn't exist, we should get our second error. Unable to get currency, USDD, and Canadian dollar. Okay, looks like everything works fine now. And that's basically it for this video. We learned how to do async await functions. We learned how do they differ from promises, and let's go through that one more time. So we have normal arrow functions here and here, and we convert that to an asynchronous function with a simple async keyword that we put before the function expression. Afterwards, we can use another magical keyword, await, that awaits data asynchronously. So when this runs and when we finally get our data from the server, which doesn't have to last a few seconds or a few milliseconds like this in this case, it can last a few minutes maybe if it's catching some large portions of databases. Then this awaits, and it awaits until this gets the right data, which is then assigned to the response. We can use that response to do everything we did here. We also did some error checking here and here with the try and catch block, and then again we asynchronously awaited the data from countries and exchange rate from the exchange rate function, and then we simply output it to the user by calling that then and console logging the message we returned. That's it for this video. This is my first video ever, so if you have any feedback or any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Maybe support this video with a like and subscribe if you like it. I'll try to post more videos like this, especially if this one gets more attention and if it was helpful for you guys. So thank you again. If you have any questions, let me know, and see you in the next video.